Hi everyone, hope everyone is well. It's Easter weekend and the weather's not very good. No great surprises there. So a good opportunity for me to play a game of bolt action. In this room I've got on my miniatures table, I've got a game all set up. I will be using the 3rd edition rules that I've got here. And it's a game between the British Airborne and the Germans. So let's have a look at the table and how I've got everything set up. So in today's game, I'm using a slightly bigger board than the last bolt action game I played. It's about 6x4, near as damn it. And I've split it in sort of two halves in terms of the video. So on the left hand side, we've got some British Airborne over in that barn there. And there's two squads, two rifle squads, 8 men. One's got a Bren gun. There's a couple of Stens in there as well. There's a Vickers machine gun inside the barn, and there's our command unit. And the scenario is that they are under siege. They're being surrounded by the Germans. On this side of the board, there's German units over here. There's a German squad, 8 men as well. There's a MG42 team just behind those woods. You can't quite see them. Got our command unit, and we've got another German squad here. And in this scenario, the Germans are going to be moving up into position, those who are not already in position, and they are laying down fire on the British Airborne. The British Airborne I'm counting as veterans. The Germans, I am not. So it's a bit more asymmetrical in that sense. And their mission, their objective, the British objective, is just to hold out for the number of turns. I'm not entirely sure how many turns I'm going to play. I was thinking some number between 4 and 6. We'll have to see. Depends on how it goes. It's one of the great things about playing these games solo. You can sort of orchestrate the rules to your liking and the scenario to your liking to create something quite thematic. And then on the right, we'll have a look at the right-hand side of the board. So on this side, we've got a British Airborne unit just here. They're going to be moving up the woods in this area here. There are some Germans in that same woods. You can maybe just about see them. There's a German squad in there. So their objective is to engage the Germans in probably close combat. Those Germans there, the barn that I just showed you is on the left-hand side, so it's just that sort of area. We've also got a British squad here and a light mortar and another British squad just here on the right-hand side. They're going to be moving across these fields. One field has crop, which I've made some crops for out the ubiquitous door matting, and but that field doesn't have any crops. And then on the far side of the board here, we've got 3 German squads and an MG42 team as well. And again, they're all regular German squads, and the British Airborne are all classed as veterans. So their objective is to move up through these fields and try and engage those Germans before those Germans can engage the British Airborne on the top right in that barn. So the objective very much is these British Airborne are going to try and basically support the Airborne that are in the barn and relieve them and try and stop the Germans from eliminating those units. How that will, first time I've played this scenario, how that will pan out is part of the fun of playing games solo. You can try out different things quite quickly for an evening's worth of gaming. So the Germans' objective is to basically, they'll class as victory if they can eliminate all those British in that barn, and the British need to move up and counter the Germans who are attacking the barn. So it's pretty straightforward, it's pretty simple. In terms of number of units, there are more German units than there are British. So I will take all the order dice and put them in the bag. In terms of, for those who are interested, in terms of gaming points, it's about 800, 850 per side. I think when I calculated it, I think the British technically have slightly more points than the Germans. I felt the British are probably in a weaker position overall than the Germans, so I gave them a few more points. We'll see how that pans out. And then what I'll do, as I do with all my videos like this, I will play through the turn and I will do a recap at the end of every turn as to what's happening and talk about the rules and talk about the narrative of the battle as it's shaping up. So after the first turn on this side of the board, the British Airborne have been able to get up into position, advancing their squads and been able to put some fire down on the Germans right over there behind those piles of wooden logs, and inflicted a couple of casualties, and put down some suppression markers on that squad as well. So I use red or orange dice to show that level of suppression there, or pins as it's called in bolt action. And now the Germans have responded with laying down, returning some fire, but to no effect. Although there's a pin marker on this squad here, on the squad on the far right, you can't quite see it. There's a pin marker on that squad. And they've moved their second squad up into this wooded area here in the middle of the board to try and halt the British airborne advance. Quite looking forward to next turn, seeing if that light mortar can have any impact. I need to check the rules to see if there's any rules for tree splintering as they're in the woods with the mortar. I'm not sure that there are, but I will check. And then on the sort of middle bit of the board, as it were, just on the right hand side of the camera, on left hand side of the camera, sorry, these British airborne here, just here, moved up into the woods, and were able to do quite well against that German squad. Obviously, the German squad were focused more on attacking the barn, which I will have a look at in a second. And but the Germans responded and actually inflicted quite a few casualties. So this British squad here have taken a couple of casualties already. The Germans in this side, on the very top left of the woods, this wooded area up here, have ran their troops in and their MG42, which is on a tripodal effect. They've been able to move into the woods and ready to give some fire on the opposing British. So we'll have a quick look on the left-hand side. So here the British are defending this position, and they've been able to put down quite a bit of fire on the opposing German squads, and have inflicted casualties and some pin markers on them. Now the Germans do have an MG42. It's just hidden by a tree position there as well. So they've got two infantry squads and an MG42. Again, on as a three-man squad. So they were able to put quite a bit of fire down on the British, and there's pins backwards and forwards and a couple of casualties. But the British have been able to hold on. In particular, the British have a Vickers gun, which I mentioned. In you can just see it, three-man squad in the barn, and the Vickers gun did very well against the Germans that are moving up into that wooded area here. So the British are trying to hold on to this position to be reinforced by those troops on the right-hand side, and the fields on the right-hand side over there. And in terms of casualties at the end of the first term, the Germans have 6 casualties, sorry. The British have 3. So the British have done quite well in the first term. But like I said, there are more Germans than there are British airborne in this particular scenario. So, but the British so far holding on. I'm not too worried about their ability to hold on to this barn. If the Germans can remove the Brits from that barn, I'll call that a game. Their objective is just to hold on and get reinforced. And the Germans have taken some casualties. However, the Germans are now in position. They've got another squad and an MG42 team over in this wooded area here. So the next turn, the Germans are going to be able to put quite a bit of fire. And on the right-hand side of him, just then, the Germans have been able to put in position to try and slow down the Brits as they cross those fields. So I think the next turn could be quite the opposite for the British airborne. But we will see. At the end of turn number 2, on this side of the board, the British airborne here have been able to engage the Germans on the other side of the woodlogs there and in that forest, and have inflicted casualties on both sides. The mortar fired into the woods, but didn't hit its target. Hopefully next turn it will. And then in this woods here, the British airborne, who had suffered at the hands of the Germans, they were able to inflict significant casualties on the Germans with some very good die rolling. And this German unit here in that woods there is now just down to three figures left versus the 5. And what the British will do next turn is charge in close combat and try and finish that squad off just there. The Germans in the woods there are pretty strong. They've only taken one casualty on one pin. The British on this side have taken, this unit here has taken a casualty. This unit here is actually still at full strength. So in terms of how things are shaping up on this area here, pretty well for the British, with probably the Germans have suffered with the exception of that unit just there. Now on this side, there's been quite a lot of action. So the British have been able to hold on to this barn area really, really well. Again, with just die rolling, good die rolling. They have suffered a little bit. So the units here have taken some casualties. The medium machine gun, the Vickers gun, has taken a casualty as well. But overall, not too bad. They, in turn, though, have inflicted significant casualties on the Germans, particularly in this area here. There's a squad there just in the woods there that are down to 3 figures, and the squad that's just behind that sort of small barn there, they are down to 4 figures. So the British have been able to hold on quite well and have inflicted some significant casualties. The Germans have tried to return fire with their MG42s here, and there's one in the woods there you can't quite see. It's just hidden by the tree models, but to no great effect. And it's interesting in terms of the game, the difference between the veteran troops and regular troops is just much harder. Obviously, just much harder to remove from their sort of defensive positions than the regulars. And the Germans are certainly having trouble removing significant casualties on the British. Obviously, because it's a die pull game, or effectively in my world from Hex and Counter chip pull game, the British were quite lucky in that the first few dies that I pulled from the bag were in favour of the British, and so they were able to sort of inflict casualties before the Germans were able to. In terms of the casualties in that turn, to give you some idea, in terms of casualties in that turn, the British inflicted 15 casualties on the Germans, and the Germans inflicted 7. So a significantly better turn for the Brits than for the Germans in that particular turn. I think so. Next turn will be interesting. They're just still on camera here on this side. This wood's just here. It'll be interesting to see what impact that will have, because if the British can remove that German unit from that woods there and then control this woods just here, that unit in turn will be able to direct fire. And the British units across the fields, just that I was just talking about, they're still being held up by the Germans quite well. In fact, the Germans are holding them quite well, even though they've suffered casualties. So turn number 3 next. At the end of turn 3, the British unit here, together with their mortar squad, which is a light mortar, 2-man mortar, they were able to eliminate that German unit in the woods there, inflict some casualties on that German unit over there. And the Germans on this side of the board really not having any great impact. Both these two squads are, this one's at 6 figures and this one's at 7, so 2 casualties though overall, only 1 casualty there. So this side of the board, the British have done very, very well in that turn by eliminating the unit. And then if we look on this side of the board, so the middle and on the left-hand side, in the middle, the British were able to engage the German unit in melee combat, hand-to-hand combat, and defeated the Germans in that case. The British, in fairness, were a stronger strength and defeated the Germans in that unit. So it's the second unit completely off the board now for the Germans. And the British there defending the barn, able to inflict severe casualties on the last German unit there. They were now down to 3 figures there. And opposite them on this side here, again, they were able to lay down quite a lot of fire, very good dice rolling, and eliminate another German unit there. So again, out of the game, this unit here down to 3 figures, the MG42 team down to 1 figure. So, and the Germans weren't able to get the dice that they needed. They did pin the British Airborne unit, that unit just over there on the far right of that wall. They were able to pin that quite effectively, but still at 5 figures, and the other unit at 6 figures with a couple of pins. The Vickers team did incredibly well. This must be a good die rolling for the Vickers squad for the whole game. So I think all up at the end of that turn, the Allies, the British inflicted, I don't know, 15 plus casualties, and the Germans only 2. So the British Airborne have trounced the Germans in that turn. And I think where we are right now, with so few Germans left on the board, I think we'll call the game there with a resounding victory to the British. And I'll just finish on some concluding thoughts. So that was a good, fun evening of wargaming using the bolt action rule set, and I enjoyed the game very much. I actually think, looking back, I thought it was going to be a closer call, and I thought the Germans would actually overall win that game. And one of my takeaways, which I'll probably learn from the next time I play, is maybe the points weren't quite right. So in that game, the British Airborne had more points, only slightly more points than the Germans did. And I thought because of the starting positions, the British would have a hard time, especially in that barn area. I thought with all the MG42s and German squads there, they would, and a lot of those German squads had STG 44s as well as MG, and they all had MG42s. So I thought just the sheer number of dice would, hamper the British, but it wasn't to be. I think so. Maybe the jeopardy wasn't quite there, the threat wasn't quite there from the Germans' perspective. The British kind of definitely had the teeth in that game. And on the right hand side of the board, where the fields were, I found that maybe a little bit more cover. I wanted to move the British up because of the way I'd laid the terrain out. It made more sense to hold back and just keep firing at their target. What I could have done there, I think, especially playing the game solo, is given the Germans a couple of mortar teams, and that would have made me move the British up much more aggressively. Because if you sit still in bolt action, then mortars can hone in and inflict quite significant casualties. So playing these sort of games solo, it's a good opportunity to reflect and think about how you want to play the game solo next time. And I do like a game where I am always going to slightly prefer one side to the other. No great surprise in that game, of course, preferring the British Airborne. But I wanted a game, or next time I play, I want a game perhaps more where it's a harder job for them. They're up against it a little bit more. So I think some takeaways there for me. But I hope you enjoyed that. If you play bolt action or you play these sort of games solo, or indeed do play, of course, at a club or anything like that, I'd love to hear some thoughts as well, as always. And thank you for watching, and take care. Thank you.